This podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. We extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples listening today.
Hello and welcome to Give and Toke Cannabis Conversations, the show that aims to elevate the conversation about cannabis to a higher level. I'm your host Paul, and today we welcome Thomas Rothmeier, aka Tom Different. Tom is a Bavarian Cannabis and Health Educator based in Victoria on Vancouver Island in Canada. He is the founder of the Different Collective, a virtual cannabis community for educators and content creators helping the cannabis community grow. Both Tom and I got our starts in Vancouver as budtenders around the same time, and much like your faithful host, Tom's experience in Vancouver absolutely changed his vision for what cannabis means and what cannabis can be. I'm excited to have Tom on the show because he talks about all sorts of amazing things like cannabis grading, looking at cannabis under the microscope, and the state of things in Germany, his homeland. If you like what you hear on today's show, make sure you follow us on your podcast platform of choice and on Instagram at Give and Toke. But for now, please enjoy my conversation with Thomas Rothmeier, aka Tom Different from the Different Collective. Now, a couple of years have passed since we shared a couple of beautiful Delahaye's doobies down by the Granville Island waterfront. What have you been toking on these last couple of years, man? What have you been loving?
Oh, homie, I've been smoking on like way too much, but also way less now that I'm not a bartender anymore. Lately, the last thing I smoked is the so-called Key Lime Kush by Lotus Cannabis Co., which has been really good, especially for the price point. Eighth, so 3.5 grams. For $33, fully frosty, fully covered in trichomes, and trichomes we will talk a little bit about today as well. So I have to be honest, Paul, lately I haven't been smoking as much, especially because I was in Germany, in my hometown in Bavaria for the last 3 months. And yeah, in Germany, we're on the way to legalize it, but it's not legal yet. And especially the government, the local government of Bavaria, says that in Bavaria it will never become legal. They literally hate cannabis, and that is the spot where I'm from. Just give your listeners a little idea about my world as well.
I was going to leave that till a bit later on, but let's jump into that now because I know Germany does have a legalization plan. This suggestion that it'll be a controlled market, 30 grams a day available to people 18 and over, and that you can grow 3 plants at home per adult. So this is the plan for 2024. You're saying Bavaria don't want anything to do with it.
Nah.
What's the status of cannabis in Germany? And then let's talk about Bavaria as well, because I know Germany are committed to this kind of medical model. There's medical patients that cannabis is available to. They're also an exporter of cannabis to the rest of the world. So where are they at in terms of that cultural understanding of cannabis, and how likely is this legalization thing to get off the ground?
So I would say barely any cultural understanding of it. That was also, I was in a sales meeting with a German company in the last little bit, and we discussed exactly that is why Canada is such a big market and Germany has such a hard time with just like drafting up some laws and just like grasping the culture behind it. So I would say Germany has barely any cannabis culture, while, as you know, Paul, Canada's cannabis culture, especially BC's cannabis culture, is crazy. And that is what I found significant about it as well. And so especially the cannabis culture in Germany is more so in bigger cities, which are more open-minded and a little bit more liberal. So, for example, it's very big in Berlin. We know, huge city in Europe, super liberal. Berlin's kind of like similar to BC, I find, where you have multiple cultures clash together at each other. But where I'm from, and the province that is the most conservative in Germany, and the province that is against legalization, that's called Bavaria. That is where all the beer, the Oktoberfest, and the Lederhosen are from. And that is the problem that I see with it, is these people were part of the Christian social democratic unions in Germany. they prefer the beer. So that's the funny thing is like when you saw these politicians talk about cannabis, for example, they have been interviewed at the Oktoberfest about cannabis legalization, and they were like, no, it will never become legal in Bavaria. But in the meantime, you see in the background how all the politicians get drunk as fuck. Like,
Yeah, drinking 80 beers.
complete alcohol abuse is okay in Bavaria, but smoking pot is definitely not okay.
I think that's interesting because I think you and I have a lot of parallels despite being from completely different places, but we're both a couple of international transplants, went to Vancouver, saw these possibilities and saw what's out there, and both being from countries that really celebrate their kind of drinking culture, but then seem to turn up their nose so quickly at cannabis use. It is interesting in Germany. I know there's 85 million people odd, only 4 million cannabis users, but in the kind of 18 to 25-year-old range, we're seeing 25% of that age range have tried cannabis. So it's very much a youth movement. So that older conservative side are going to stick to their guns and keep things the way they are. But hopefully it's, the people even younger than us that are doing this work and that are bringing this to the forefront. With that in mind, do you think there's any legs to this legalization happening? Do you think that it's just a conversation that's going to help, or is there actually any chance that this could go through?
I think there's all of that. So it's a very hard case because there are a couple of different perspectives, because right now we have the so-called traffic light parties in the government, which are the Green Party, Yellow Party, and the Red Party. And they are pro-cannabis legalization, where the parties that brought it up and brought it into the voting program as well. And so on the one side, I could see how, because they brought it into the voting program and their entire program for what they want to do in this regulatory period, in terms of the voters, they have to make it legal because they promised it, basically. But also on the flip side, if they don't make it legal now, they could use it one more time to gather voters as well. And that is like a significant amount of voters if you would think about all the medical patients and all of the people that just generally want to have recreational cannabis in Germany. So I hope they ring it through. The problem that I could see with it being problems coming up is that just the conservative Christian parties that we talked about would try everything to interfere with this, because we know that there could be some complications with the European rights and the European contracts, where you already could see how people from the conservative parties even went to the European Parliament. So they went behind back of our German Parliament to tell the Europeans, yo, Germany wants to make it legal. Can we figure out something to prevent this? And this is kind of like how the people are strict. So it's like a fight for cannabis legalization. So I hope they ring it through. But there can be a lot of obstacles in the way, is what I'm trying to communicate here, very lengthy.
You mentioned that kind of social democratic Christian party, and that's something that kind of comes up as a threat. I know when New Zealand voted a couple of years ago for legalization, and it was basically like 49% yes, 51% no. Their no campaign had been heavily funded by an American-based Christian conservative group. So it's definitely something to be mindful of and to be careful of for anyone who's pursuing legalization, that those nefarious actors from other parts of the world will come in to try and inhibit that law from going through, because they're scared of the implications that it could have elsewhere. So I know Germany will have to kind of reckon with the EU, and the rest of the world are kind of constantly just being scared off by conservatives. So we need to fight back against that. Here in Australia, in my state, Victoria, we've got our parliamentarians about to vote to change the Drug Driving Act so that people that are on medical cannabis aren't discriminated against. In South Australia, the state next to us, they've just brought in a law that gives instant loss of license for people that have THC in their system. So even somewhere that is kind of looking federally at legalization, that has little pockets of legalization that's pretty progressive when it comes to medical cannabis, we're still seeing a state side by side can have two completely different ideas of what's right. So these are big fights, and I hope that anyone who cares about cannabis informs themselves and kind of gets involved, because we need the supporters, because there are plenty of people behind the scenes saying no.
Yeah, and especially it's the same problem in Germany as well, as they have the same laws regarding driving. So basically, you getting a medical cannabis license in Germany is technically you giving away your driver's license as well. Just only if the police would catch you, but at the end of the way, it doesn't matter. Even if you're driving around sober, you're a medical cannabis patient, they take your driver's license away. And yeah, we both know, I think, that that is bullshit. And we have German content creators, and they actually they brought together a couple of like doctors, lawyers, cannabis patients, normal people to actually do a driving test where they could prove that medical cannabis patients that had cannabis in their system drove 80% better than they were usually driving, or even better than people who are not smoking pot. So this doesn't make any sense, and I'm very excited for what the German content creators will bring out of that as well. Because what I think what will happen is Germany right now is a key. If Germany legalizes weed, the door is unlocked and everyone will follow, for a simple fact that what I know from the lawyer friends that I have in Germany, shout out to Lee Tulor, who's a cannabis creator and lawyer, that countries like to use German law structure and German regulation structures to copy and paste them into their governments, because the Germans are nitty gritty people that will figure out every single obstacle and every single wording that could be wrong to make the perfect law. So all the other countries are just like, yo, bro, let's just chill on these cannabis regs. Let the Germans figure it out. We're good at this shit.
Definitely seeing the rest of the world lean on that reputation of being very systematic, very pragmatic. But, you know, it's true. And I think that's exciting. I do hope that Germany do have a part to play in that legalization, and fingers crossed for all those cannabis users in Germany. Hopefully it comes through. I guess that's a good time to ask, prior to Vancouver, what was your relationship like with cannabis? Growing up somewhere that doesn't have that kind of culture and even has that conservative lean, did you have any experience or understanding of cannabis prior to Vancouver?
I smoked it, but I did not understand it. I was one of the guys who likely smoked CBD and was completely mind blown how my friend and me could just smoke 2 grams and we don't feel anything, but it looks like weed and it smells like weed. So what the fuck is going on? But yeah, that drastically changed from the second I went into the first cannabis store. I was like, yo, I want to know everything about this because of how conservative it is in Germany. And cycling back to your question, like the way how I started getting into weed was that I started to work out at the gym and I wanted to become stronger and healthier. And I one day realized that alcohol is actually bad for your muscles, your growth, your health. But then being in Bavaria, where everyone goes out and gets literally fucked up on alcohol each time we go out, I needed a drug to replace alcohol. And that is how I landed at cannabis, because it was like, wow, this doesn't harm my muscles. I don't feel like a piece of shit on the very next day. And I'm in a better mood and I can even deal with the drunk people at the same time. It's like a perfect going out drug. And that's kind of like how all of that got started for me in Germany. So it was just a recreational consumer just looking for another drug. So I don't have to be drunk anymore.
There's something very special about making that discovery, and I still think there's an element of shame there. I still think there's an element of hiding, because a lot of people assume that, oh, you're smoking weed to get high or to get fucked up as well. But you do hit this kind of critical mass at some stage as a recreational user where you realize the benefits and you realize the therapeutic value, and you start to go, God, what harm am I doing? And you mentioned it, you know, that even eliminating those hangovers, eliminating that feeling like shit, you don't often do anything too embarrassing on cannabis other than maybe, you know, green out or pass out if you're a bit of a rookie. It doesn't have that propensity to kind of drive you crazy and have you, you know, vomiting your guts out on Granville Street, does it?
The only thing that I could realize, but it also depends on the consumers, but I just got paranoid really often when I smoked weed. I got fucking paranoid. And that is the exciting and interesting things, and why it's so hard for conservative people to grasp their mind around it. Because with alcohol, it literally always goes the same way. Like, a person that has one beer won't go crazy. Like, they will get drunk, yeah, but they won't get fucked up from one beer. But that is different with cannabis, is what I figured out. If someone's smoking cannabis for the very first time, especially, sometimes they don't feel anything. Sometimes they have the worst experience of their life with a drug, and that is why it's also so complicated and so fascinating to learn about cannabis and to consume cannabis. Because even though I claim myself to be a cannabis educator and someone who understands plant really well, like, I still green out pretty often. Like, I get paranoid sometimes, and I hate that this is happening to me right now. But that also just showed me how we're all different and how we all have to figure out our own tolerance and our own way of using cannabis. Because, for example, I was sure that I would not smoke any weed before I'm talking with you right now. Because for me, often when I'm smoking cannabis, especially if it's not the right strain and not the right amount, I will stumble upon my words, and I will stumble all over all of my thoughts, and I just won't be able to communicate as well as I would like to. And that then annoys me, and then I'm in less of a good mood as it could be, just for a simple fact that I don't perform as well as I could because I'm just stoned.
I think that was definitely one of the tenets of the bud tender life that I found so difficult on occasion, just because of that need to know the product so well that you would end up kind of exploring so many things that didn't necessarily match your flavor palette or your experience palette. And sometimes you would find yourself in those experiences.
Yeah.
Now that I'm a medical patient, I have this completely different view and angle and approach to cannabis, where my consumption is much lower and a lot more controlled, because I'm on this like strict array of products, which I can only change every few months. So that's really working well for me. But I certainly remember those days where, like, oh, this hot new product has dropped, you got to try it, and then it's ruined the next 4 hours of your life. So I think it's good for people to still hear that even those of us that do put ourselves in this space and operate in this space still have to tread carefully. And while I talk a lot on this show about how much better cannabis is than alcohol, I think you raise a really good point about it's not as easy to step into, to have those first cannabis experiences aren't as easy as those first alcohol experiences. You have a few sips of beer, you're fine. You can literally have a puff and it can ruin your evening. So
yeah,
you do have to tread carefully.
I literally had a moment where, and it also depends on your stress levels and everything that's going on in your life, how cannabis interferes with your system. But I had a moment where I had a really stressful week, and I got to get a haircut. And before the haircut, I was thinking, okay, I'm gonna relax a little bit. I bought this new strain. I'm just gonna smoke one hitter of it. And then I sat there at the haircut, and it was like, should I tell the guy to call an ambulance? Is there something feeling very weird in my chest right now? Am I about to die right now? And I was like, no, it's the weed. It's the weed. It's the weed. I'm pretty sure it's the weed. If you're gonna die right now, if you pass out, the guy will call an ambulance. That was where my head was going, and that is not the first time. So yeah, the way that you go is also what I think is going to be the right way. Later is like stoner content. It's really nice, really funny to watch, but it's not a way to live, actually. It's something that I realized for myself as well. And it's also a commitment that I made while I was in Germany, because I smoked less weed in Germany because I had to. Because in Canada, for example, Paul, that is me coming back to Canada. Come back, I bought a new Ave. I got free drinks sent to me, and I got a vape for free. And the vape is my greatest enemy. It reminds me why I never buy distillate or full resin vapes usually, because you walk around, you see it liver, and you just take it, and you just take 3 hauls, and you're like, fuck, I'm really tired now. It's 12 p.m. Shit.
I'm in Walmart and I'm tired as shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Vapes are definitely another area to tread carefully in.
Yeah, dry herb vapes are better, but the distillate ones, man, they ruin your life.
I want to talk a little bit more about Vancouver and kind of what your start in the cannabis industry was.
Yeah.
As I said before, we had similar entry points. We were both bud tenders at some of the earliest cannabis stores in Vancouver. So talk to us about what your experience has been kind of from Arrival.
Arrival, if we are on the topics of getting fucked, Arrival was immediately greened out really hard, really hard. Yeah, I arrived after 26 hours. The first thing that I did after getting into the hostel was that I bought, I think, a free pack of joints from a gray market store, so a not legal cannabis store back in the day. This was in March 2019. And I bought a cookie as well, and I smoked a joint, smoked Germans roll with tobacco, by the way. Most of the Germans roll their joints with tobacco because we don't have as much supply. So I was also used to rolling tobaccos. So smoked the entire pure joint. I ate half of a cookie where the guy told me just to take a bite, and I ate half of it. And I greened out really hard on Granville Island. I think I even told you when we smoked those Delaware joints that is the spot I greened out. But yeah, after that, I went to English school for a couple of weeks and looked for a job while I was staying with guest family. And then shortly after 3 weeks after arriving in Canada, I found a job and started my first day as a bud tender for City Cannabis Co. I was one of Paul's fellow competitors, but also co-workers in the industry, and started my first day on April 19th, 2020. So one day before 420. That's how I will never forget my first day in the industry. And yeah, worked my way up quickly in the store that I worked at, from bud tender to supervisor to assistant manager of our flagship location in downtown Vancouver, upon being like the main trainer and staff trainer and education guy in that company.
I think it's so funny you mention us being competitors, because I do think back to those early days. Like, we'd get City Cannabis workers come into our store to buy our products because our shelf prices were cheaper than the staff discount.
Yeah.
So we were just like, fuck those guys at City Cannabis. I never even went into the store. And now, like 2 years on, I haven't thought about City Cannabis once. So it was such an important rivalry to me, 3.5 years ago. Now I totally forget it.
Yeah. I know it's also at the end of the day, you gotta say Muse just the bomb though. So you could never, like, you can say a lot of things about City Cannabis. Like, whenever I go into a Muse store, I'm like, buddy, I love this. Look at what you guys have. Look at how nice it is in here. Look how happy you all are. Wow.
Oh man, it was a pretty good time, I've got to admit.
Yeah.
Well, moving from Vancouver then onto Vancouver Island, I guess that's kind of a step further into this like alternative lifestyle cannabis culture that Canada is so famous for. How has your knowledge grown since moving to that part of Canada?
The change for that was mostly so far a very personal change, because you've lived in Vancouver, Paul. How busy is Vancouver?
Well, I think this will be a really interesting point of difference, because coming from a city of 4.5 million, Vancouver was a massive change of pace for me. Like, it was going to a much smaller town.
Crazy, because for me, coming from a small village in Bavaria, it felt very crowded and you just get lost in Vancouver. That's how a lot of people talk about it. It's basically you live in Vancouver, but no one really notices that you're there, basically. Victoria is way smaller again, way slower pace, but you have the same beautiful nature, ocean, mountains, animals, all the beautiful stuff that makes up what BC is so famous for. And I feel like I have a smaller community, but a more close-knit community here. And there's especially a big under radar market here in terms of personal home growers or gray market stores or also indigenous stores here. So there's a lot going on Vancouver Island and especially in Victoria as well. But there's also a lot of work that needs to be done here that I think. So one of the things that we are planning on doing in the next little bit is also to get the communities local communities of certain places together, from the budtenders to the consumers, to bring the people together, because there is something that has been happening in Vancouver right now. Paul, you probably saw the book club meetings. That I find is an awesome idea, and something like this is just needed in Victoria as well, because here are so many stores, so many people smoke weed here, and there are zero events for people to smoke weed. So we gotta get the homies together soon.
Circling back to what you said about Vancouver, even though you and I had different experiences in terms of the density and the busyness, for me it was a step down, it was a lot slower. For you, it was a lot busier. We can definitely still agree on that strange kind of coldness and that lack of connection. And I think it has a lot to do with how transient the city is. Like, if you're a local there and you're seeing all these people kind of coming and going, international visitors, tourists, people on short-term visas, I think it's hard for Vancouver locals to really embrace people, because they're like, well, is this guy still going to be here in 3 months' time? So I certainly made lifelong friends in Vancouver and relished that in a way it was like a blank canvas for people like us to go and really thrive. But I certainly agree that it can be a challenging place for people. And I think that's something anyone should keep in mind. And again, not to disrespect the place, but it is challenging to build communities and build relationships there.
Yeah, but also from my point of view, which you just brought up as well, for like the opportunity it gave us as well. So I don't know too much about Toronto. I need to figure out more about Toronto. But I would say if you want to enter the cannabis industry and you're from a different country, Vancouver is the way to go.
Yeah, if you want to go and make something and drive that yourself, I think that's the place to go for sure.
Yeah.
So in line with this desire of yours to kind of create these events in Vancouver Island and to be someone that brings people together, let's talk about the Different Collective. This is something that you've started since I left Canada. What is the Different Collective?
So the Different Collective is our community of cannabis educators and cannabis content creators who also appreciate a sense of mindfulness in their lives as well. The Different Collective right now, we're revamping it a little bit, because we started the collective less than a year ago. Actually, our official date was 4/20, 2021. And from where the people that we started the collective with have massively grown in the work that we do and endeavored in some different fields, while my business partner Francis and me, who's also one of the educators in our collective, are right now revamping a little bit what we do. And we do really want to focus on this community aspect again. And so what we're doing right now is we're facilitating 2 different cannabis courses. We have an English cannabis microscopy course that Francis moderated. Francis, my business partner, he's from the UK, so he has a perfect British accent to moderate an English course. And I'm taking over our German microscopy course, where we basically use microscopes like the digital desktop microscope that we have here to explain people everything about cannabis trichomes and how they can find different undesirables in their cannabis that could potentially cause harm to them if they don't inspect it and would smoke a moldy product, for example. But the most interesting thing that we have coming up with the Different Collective, and also one of the reasons that it was a little bit more quiet around the collective lately, because Francis and me have been working like crazy, man. I can promise you, I was in Germany 3 months. I wasn't there for vacation. I was there so my parents could take care of me and I could just work and hustle and do a lot of stuff. But we have a cannabis grading app coming up that we want to release this April. Also want to release it on 4/20 at the BC Cannabis Summit. Basically go the entire way that we walked last year. And Paul, we also need some beta testers, by the way. And for the beta testers right now, we're looking A, for budtenders, and B, we're looking for content creators, because we want to show the budtenders how this grading system can make their job easier. And we want to show the content creators how this grading system can make their review process easier. So the Differing Collective is venturing into cannabis courses, cannabis education, and still supporting the community as well through our Discord channel where people can network and reach others and ask each other questions, but also through our Instagram channel.
I'll make sure the links to all those are down in the show notes for this episode because they're great things. And, you know, the entire time I've known you, that desire to kind of put cannabis under the microscope has been a big passion of yours and something that you've really grown to love and really refine your approach to. So let's talk about that. Why should a bud tender, why should a consumer be putting their cannabis under the microscope? What types of things are they looking for? You know, you alluded to quality and things like that, but let's go a little deeper. When that cannabis goes under the microscope, what are we looking for?
The number one reason, before I answer what you're looking for, on the number one reason why people should use a microscope that you asked is because it's fun. That's the number one reason. It's super interesting and it's fun. And that's what I realized yesterday. I was going to a bunch of stores yesterday, bringing a microscope, and at the Burp, we put some buds under the microscopes in the stores as well. And that is like the most fun that I see is like you put it on, you put a nug under it, and everyone's eyes go from being like, oh, I'm like Blaze Bud to whoa, what is going on here? So yeah, the number one reason is because, and that also ventures into what are we looking at? We are looking at trichomes and we're looking at plant material basically. And those are like the two interesting things that we can observe under a microscope, because if on the plant material, for example, you would find white powder on it, or you would find spider web looking like white strings on it, then you're likely looking at mold body, and mold contains so-called mycotoxin, which can cause lung emphysema. I never know if I pronounce this right, but it's not good for your lungs is what I'm trying to say, and can evoke lung cancer even as well, which is very interesting because I saw some articles lately as well that looked into the potential harms of cannabis on lungs. And it was shown that as long as you don't roll it with tobacco, cannabis is actually not harmful for your lungs. So if you would smoke something that is weed, but it's moldy, then you're causing harm for your lungs. And that is where we go into from the microscope into the grading system that we're coming up with soon as well, because the microscope can tell you a lot about your cannabis, but your eyes, your nose, and your sense of taste can also tell you even more about your cannabis. So what we're doing essentially with our grading system and with the microscopes right now is we show you how you can dissect the cannabis plant and all of its objective quality assuring components, so you can make a completely objective opinion about the product, not only about why is this good quality product or a bad quality product, but also if in these quality aspects, one aspect's off from the others. So for example, the bud looks beautiful, but smokes like shit. You can look at all these aspects and be like, why is it like that? And then the growers can learn how they produce better cannabis, and the consumers and the bud tenders can learn how to analyze their cannabis better to draw immediate clues from your cannabis, and clues that are quite obvious, but the grading system will just help you to make it a little bit more obvious, because it will help you to understand that if you have a product that you want to consume and you take a dry pull and all you taste is nothing, you don't taste any terpenes, you can already from that figure out that this product very likely won't taste like anything if you smoke it, and will probably also be harsh because all you're smoking is plant material at this point and no terpenes or no aromatic phytochemicals. And this is one of the reasons why I'm also a big dry pull fan. Everyone should do a dry pull, by the way.
Yes, definitely one of the biggest dry pull enthusiasts. For those that don't know what a dry pull is, please explain.
Dry pull is basically the simple act of taking a little toke off your joint before you even light it, for the simple reason that this is the only one moment of your entire experience consuming this herb where you will taste the entire flavor profile of your cultivar, because at this point when you're doing this dry toke where nothing's combusting, you're inhaling all of the aromatic phytochemicals, which are terpenes, phiols, phthalates, and esters. So there's more to cannabis aroma than just terpenes. And the aroma, as we know from the entourage effect, drives the stimulating to sedative spectrum of the effects the cannabis can provoke in you. So the dry pull is the only way where you can assess this entire aromatic profile, because at the point where you're lighting it, you're combusting all of these aromatic phytochemicals right now, and you can still taste them now, but you don't taste the entire spectrum of them anymore, because now you have this layer of combustion that changes the flavor entirely as well. So this is like the more nuanced, lengthy explanation of a dry pull, but I hope it makes sense to you.
It does make sense, and it's something that I kind of struggle to get people to embrace, because they're like, man, I just want to get high and, smoke this thing. It's like just actually taking a moment with the cannabis, I think also informs that relationship we so often talk about having with cannabis, just taking a moment, being mindful, actually thinking about your consumption, because the benefits are immense when you do that. We've all been guilty of chain smoking too many joints and kind of, ruining our day or whatever, for whatever reason, got a bunch going on, just want to forget the world. But the best experiences are when you take a moment with it. It could be 5, 10, 15 minutes that you smoke a joint in that day, and it can be a really special experience, and that dry pull is part of it for sure.
Yeah, and the dry pull, as I'm saying, it's the dry pull is a skill you can learn as well. And it's something that we will teach people through our grading system as well, because technically I could just assess you through the dry pull how the cultivar will likely make you feel. And this is where people are like, if you bring, the people, you bring a bunch of joints to an event and all of the joints are labeled. If you're good at dry pulling, you don't have to write anything on your joints. You take a toke and be like, this is ultra sour, this is chocolate chip, whatever, this is blueberry pie, this is this and this. Or even like if you have shitty weed, that's also how I know the shitty weed is. Like I bring joints, one of them I know isn't very good, like, oh yeah, this tastes like nothing, this is the one we can smoke first because of shit.
Look, you obviously have a lot of fun with it, and you mentioned that that's the number one thing for the microscopy course as well. Microscopy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Microscopy in
the
German.
microscope course. And you spoke about the importance of it being an objective process. And I think that's something that comes up a lot in cannabis, is there's a lot of this personal opinion stuff. It's like, oh, this is fireweed, man. This is mids. This is trash.
Yeah.
Your process actually allows people to kind of see a real number, a real grade, and actually establish if something is objectively good or not. So I'm really glad to hear that, because that is something that's been missing a lot.
Yeah, I feel like right now, Paul, you're also bringing up something good, because like with the different collective and like for instance, me are doing so much that sometimes it's really difficult to explain it very shortly what we do actually. But I feel like the way that we want to go, or the way that this will go with the education that we will bring up, because we've been working a lot on Notion. For everyone who's an entrepreneur, also you as a content creator, I can really recommend Notion, because Notion's a note-taking app. So we're building our entire brand and all the education right now simultaneously to us doing a bunch of things just by writing every idea we have into Notion. And like the big concept that we're creating right now with the grading system and the next education that's about to come, because we're also planning to launch a cannabis grading course after we've launched the survey as well. So you can learn even more about the surveys and why we made certain aspects as they are. Because what we really want, what the big goal is that we have in mind, is we want to change the entire way how consumers look and understand cannabis. And that starts from the consumers and goes very much into the budtenders and retailers as well. Because not only will our grading system help you to learn how you can predict how certain cultivars will make you feel, but you will also learn all of the different components that make up the overall quality of a product. You will learn about yourself, what you favor and enjoy the most about certain products. You will have your own journal that will tell you these products, and this is one thing that is missing on the market, I think, and this is the bridge that we built for the market, is with the grading systems that are out there, you have no grading system that go into the negative side. Everyone's like, yeah, weed is awesome, everything's good, but it's like, nobody, just like burns my throat and tastes like shit, and I feel fucking paranoid right now. This is bad weed. And this is what our survey will tell you. Our survey will tell you, this makes me anxious, this makes me paranoid, this makes me feel unwell, I can't work after I smoke this. But on the flip side, it will also tell you, this makes me mostly mood enhanced, this makes me mostly happy with this cultivar, I laugh my ass off. And all of this is dissected into the objective and the subjective parts, because at the end of the day, Paul, if you and me would have the same phytocannabinoid disbalance, or we have just the same flavors that we like to consume, you and me can talk about the products that you like right now and whatever. But this doesn't work like that. If you come as a customer into a store and you ask the bartender, yeah, what's your favorite product right now, and he says this or that, that's completely subjective opinion that you're getting right now, buddy. This opinion definitely won't bring you anything, because maybe the bartender has a super high tolerance, maybe they don't have any tolerance, maybe for example, they don't get paranoid if they smoke cultivars that smell like nuts. So that's a thing. For myself, I realized, and I did various tries, I smoked 6 different cultivars, always logging how I feel afterwards. I can't smoke strains that smell like nuts. Makes me paranoid. They smell like nuts, I go nuts.
Well, that's something that I kind of forgot to mention. You know, we're talking so much about what is quality cannabis, but the purpose for that is to find what works for you.
Exactly.
And I think it's great that you emphasize that point. Circling back to something else I want to talk about is trichomes. What are they?
So trichomes are essentially the small little resin glands that primarily grow on the so-called bracts of your cannabis flowers. And those little resin glands were hair-like looking, and in their so-called trichome heads, they metabolize all of the phytocannabinoids and all of the aromatic phytochemicals that evoke intoxication in you, basically. So that is the more sciencey approach to it. At the end of the day, trichomes are the white hair-like looking hairs that grow over your weed and make it shiny and glistening. And the trichomes are the main reason why you get high, because in the cannabis plant itself, there's 0 THC, 0 CBD, no terpenes. Everything that gets you high, everything that makes cannabis aromatic lies within the trichome heads. And that is why trichomes are the most important component of cannabis flower. And that is the main reason why we look at them and why we grade them under the microscope as well. Because the bigger your trichome head, technically speaking, the more potential is there for phytochemicals to be stored in your plants. So that is why you mostly want to look for big ass, juicy, white trichomes, because from those trichomes you can expect the highest amount of phytochemicals, which then should provide you with the most intense effects as well.
I'm wondering then, because cannabis users that use kind of 4-piece grinders that collect the trichomes at the bottom and essentially split the plant material, do you have a preference between a 2-piece and a 4-piece grinder for that reason?
Yeah, always 2-piece. is my preference, because at the end of the day, Paul, as I mentioned as well, is my tolerance is never going really up. So I'm not the really the person, unless I want to get fucked. Sometimes I want to get fucked. It's like, buddy, like I get fucked constantly. But but yeah, I'm not that type of way who sprinkles keef over their joints or anything. That's not me. I want those trichomes right away. So 2-piece grinder is the way to go for me.
Fair enough, fair enough. Well, it's been an absolute delight to talk to you about these things. And as we move towards the end of the show, there's a little quiz that I want to do with you. Are you up for it?
Yeah, 100%.
Let's do it. Best thing about the cannabis industry?
Legal weed.
Worst thing about the cannabis industry?
Capitalism.
Indica, sativa, or hybrid?
Use our grading system and look at the predicted effects.
Flower or edibles?
Flower, always.
Joints or blunts?
Yeah, Paul, you tell me.
You're going with the joints, aren't you?
Yeah.
Bongs or pipes?
Definitely pipes, especially one-hitters, because, bro, if you ever see me smoke a bong, I get disoriented, my eyes water, I cough my lungs out, and I feel really, really unwell.
Best Bavarian beer?
Augustina.
Favorite place to consume?
The rooftop at my house in Bavaria.
Dirk Nowitzki or Detlef Schrempf?
Always Dirk.
Bavarian Alps or the Canadian Rockies?
Oh, the Alps are cozier, but the Rockies look nicer. So, yeah, the Alps are like cozy these days.
And finally, describe your perfect 420.
Massive amounts of weed and not greening out.
Well, that is absolutely delightful. Well, as we get to the tail end of the show, our final segment is called Pauls of Wisdom. And this is where you share a snappy, easy dinner party fact that the average person needs to know about cannabis. So, Tom, what is your Paul of Wisdom?
Paul of Wisdom is we're all different. We're all humans. We're all different. All of our endocannabinoids systems are different, all of our tolerances, all of our preferences, all of our allergens, it's all different. So consume different, consume as much as you need, and don't talk people into consuming more than they need.
That's beautiful. Tom Different says, we're all different. Well, it's been an absolute delight to have you on the show. Before you go, where can our listeners find you on the internet?
You can find me on the internet, on YouTube, under Tom Different, on Instagram, under the Different, Tom Different, and you can check out our website, urbanistic.ca, if you would like to get enrolled in our English cannabis microscopy course, or if you would like to purchase a digital cannabis microscope.
Fantastic. Well, Tom, my Bavarian bud-tending bud brother, it's been an absolute delight to have you on the show.
Same, Paul. Thank you for inviting me, and it's been great seeing your face finally again after such a long time.
Give and Toke Cannabis Conversations is written and produced by me, Paul. Music written, produced and performed by Big Mike. Follow us on Instagram at Give and Toke, or get in touch by emailing giveandtoke@gmail.com. You'll also find us on both Twitter and Facebook. All opinions expressed by program guests are solely their current opinions and do not necessarily reflect the position of Give and Toke. Content discussed in this show does not constitute medical advice. Cannabis is not legal everywhere, so please be aware of local laws.